What if your brand isn't a brand at all? What if it's just a presentation dressed up with a nice template? See, on today's show, we're going to dig into what a speaker's brand really is and why getting it wrong quietly costs you credibility and bookings. And we've got a certified designer and brand strategist who works closely with speakers to help them turn messages into something far more marketable. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Steve Drapkin, is a professionally certified designer, brand strategist, and marketer. He's the public relations manager in Toastmasters District 83, and he's a trusted partner to podcasts, nonprofits, speakers, events, and growing businesses. Welcome to the show, Stephen. Really nice to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
That's a pleasure. I want to dive right in. I want to start with the word brand because I got to tell you, you ask five people to even start there and they'll give you different answers. So, what are we really talking about for a speaker and where do most people get it wrong?
Thank you very much for the question. And this is always what comes to mind when people ask, what is branding? Because branding is such a fluffy concept for some people. It's not tangible. Many people think of, oh, I have all my marketing metrics and it's very easy to quantify, whereas branding is much more fluffy and harder to think about what it is, and everyone's going to give you a different answer. My answer comes from lots of research and a scientific basis. For speakers, I don't look at a brand any differently than I would look at a business. And that applies to all personal brands, not just speaker brands. But my definition for branding is a complex network of thoughts, information, and experiences and feelings associated with a specific offering in a consumer's mind that shapes the way they feel and act towards that offering. And it all comes down to what is the perception that you can create. That is branding.
All right. Right. I'm halfway there. Give me an example. All right. And let's take an amazing business, mine. But let's just take a professional speaker. So, because you're right. I hear this term branding all the time. As a sales trainer, believe it or not, I teach sales. I start with, tell me what the word selling means, and I'll get a bunch of different answers. So it's good that we're closing in on this, but give me an example. All right, I'm a meat and potatoes guy, been on the road 40 years, speaking, all over the world. Um, are my books my branding? Is my name my branding? I don't want to play guess my line, but what exactly is my branding?
Absolutely. So in your business, branding is different than marketing. And I know some people would think of them intertwined. I look as branding as the overall identity of who you are verbally and visually. And I only look at marketing and the rest of your business. So your website, your collateral, your speeches, your podcasts, everything that people see is a way to get that identity out there. And the way I think of things would be the goal of a brand is to build desired associations with your audience, and you'll have multiple audiences. Every way and form that you market yourself and your business is the goal behind those are to build the associations you want. So every piece of marketing, your logo, your website, your copy on your website should all build the desired associations that you develop within your identity. And the goal behind those are to both have your desired meaning that you want. So positioning yourself as the expert that you want, your services not having so many that they're diluted, but knowing what the effect that you have on your audiences are. And then also making sure that those are distinct from your competitors. and which would mean they're not the exact same services, and that the effect would be different and lie in the gaps that exist within your industry.
Okay. All right. We're circling it now. Um, you know, being a professional speaker is not necessarily a branding, but it's interesting. I have two podcasts, and other podcasts that I've done for 6 years, and I felt that the branding was rather loose. In other words, it's referred to as pocket-sized pep talks. It's a wonderful show, but you never know what you'll hear on that show. Isn't that great? Not from a marketing standpoint, not from a branding standpoint. Whereas the presentation whisperer, and you tell me if I've got this right, he's actually beginning to sort of get a little bit closer to a branding. Okay, so this guy is not only talking to speakers, but he's helping speakers out. He's the whisperer. He's going to get more intimate and deeper into this topic. Is that a branding?
It
You're
is
allowed
in
to
a way,
say no, by the way. Okay.
it is in a way that you have a perception that you're building. However, in most of the aspects of a brand are come in my approach come from insights, from asking the right questions, and from research. And a lot of that comes from deeply knowing your audience and deeply knowing your competitors, which gives you where people are unhappy with certain podcasts. For example, if people are listening to Speakernomics or the Speaker Lab podcast, for example, or many other speaker podcasts that exist, and there's people that aren't going, that's not going to be for. But if you know what they don't do well or who their audience is, maybe your audience is a little different, or maybe you approach things in a different way, but that all would come through in your marketing, and that would be developed originally as the foundation in your branding, which is just your identity.
Okay. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Branding?
In a
Branded
way,
as I know exactly who he is by just hearing his name and a few more words. You got to give me a little
yeah,
credit on that one.
absolutely. Absolutely. And he actually, if you look at him, he's a really good example because he, I don't know if he was the creator of any of this, maybe the TV networks, but he knew, someone knew that their target was going to be kids. And a science, just a scientist is a very general, I don't know if he's actually a scientist, but a scientist towards kids changes the way he approaches things because he has to explain things very simply, make things funny, make it goofy, make it entertaining. And the fact that he knows his target and knows what his competitors are, which he's not in the science space at all. He's not in the educational space. He's not in that space where you'd be end up on a Disney Plus like National Geographic or any of those other channel, Discovery Channel. He wouldn't end up on those. He would end up on the channel where you're targeting kids, and that changes his approach. That changes what he wears. That changes how the show is produced. That changes what his desired perception would be. Because I'm sure he wouldn't approach it in the way that he does if he wasn't targeting kids and he didn't see a gap in the educational market for the competitor shows right now.
All right, to answer your question, piece of trivia here. He is a science guy. My wife went to high school with him. So yeah. So not that I've ever met him, but yeah, he was Bill Nye, the guy on the left in the left seat in the back corner. That was his branding then. But now he's Bill Nye, the science guy. It's funny. I see. Do you ever see a movie called That Thing You Do? Wonderful movie, Tom
I've
Hanks
never
movie.
heard of it actually.
Oh, it's a wonderful movie. Got like a little cult following, not his biggest movie, but there's a band, and it's sort of a one-hit wonder band from the 60s. And one guy, he's the promoter. And he looks at the drummer, he says, gives him these dark sunglasses. And he says, "Now your name is Shades, and you're going nowhere without these sunglasses on." Is that a form of branding?
In a way, it is in the fact that it creates a perception.
Hmm.
I don't know what the thought is behind the shade. So if there's a desired result that he's getting behind the shades and seen and being seen by a certain way, maybe it makes him cooler. Has a certain maybe there's a certain frame that people have a reference to that other people wore shades and that makes him a cooler part of the brand of the band. In that case, that could be branding.
Okay. This show should be called Is It or Is It Not Branding? Now, uh, how about when we're not on stage? Let's get off stage for a minute. How would my branding, let's forget Rob's branding, how would a professional speaker's branding uh, show up before they're on the stage, as an example?
A speaker's branding would show up in the way that people research them. So let's say the event planners are researching them, or there's people that want to see where is this person speaking. And I know we spoke about Tony Robbins previously. You said he's a unicorn, but people love Tony Robbins and will go over all over for Tony Robbins wherever he is. And when people search up Tony Robbins and the events he'll be at, whether it's his business mastery, his other programs, people search him up and people know exactly what they're going to get because he's built up these associations over time. And a lot of that comes from his NLP programs, which he expands into other things, but most of it's boiled down to either NLP or he borrows authority from other experts that he brings in. And he just takes the position of, I'm interviewing these people or I know these people that I can get to. But it comes in the way that they would research you. So if they're looking on your website, the perception that you give them could absolutely make you a $2,000 per speech speaker, or it could be a $50,000 or $150,000 per speech speaker in the way that you position yourself. And that could be in the problem you solve, what your differentiator is, the if you know your audience so well that you can match your personality to your audience, which is how all your marketing is written, not necessarily what's said, but how it's written. And if it matches that, then those are things that can affect your pricing, how many bookings you're getting, how big of a following you have, which is your leverage, and how easily you can monetize everything because people will resonate with the problem that you're solving for them, and it's very easy to get them to buy your courses, buy your book, sell from the stage, and people will be waiting to hear you and looking for you rather than I happen to be at this event and you just are a speaker there.
Right. There was a guy I saw speak, and a big number. Just leave it at that. I'll let Harry take it from there. But Harry Dent was a guy that spoke at a lot of meetings that I spoke at some years ago. But he had the ability. He's an economist. There's a lot of economists. He owned that financial industry, and why? Because he simplified economy. Okay, a
Yeah,
discussion on economy, which was important for financial analysts, brokers, because they've got to simplify it for their clients. He was able
yeah,
to make that turn and was fabulously successful as a speaker, just simplifying. And
absolutely. And that is something that comes from if he did the research on the audience, he may have seen a bunch of different things online, whether wherever that may be back then, that said these people think finance is too complicated. People think that this is something that they don't understand or they don't trust the experts and they want to know for themselves. Or some competitors that he didn't agree with how they were approaching their audience with their message and making it simpler. And those are ways that he may have found that gap that he put himself in simplifying everything.
right. Oh, I'm pretty sure he was well researched on that. I don't think he backed into that. Uh, let's flip it a little bit. Give me a classic branding mistake that you see even experienced speakers make or entrepreneurs from your seat.
Absolutely. People, the first part is thinking of branding as just the colors, the logos. I'm a designer at heart. I've been designing for 8 years. Graphic design was the first thing I learned before I even got into brand strategy and marketing, and I love it. However, I realized so many speakers and so many entrepreneurs look at it and say, "Does this look good?" And I'm sure you want everything to look good. You want it to look professional. However, it's not an asset or a tool that is based on anything that can make anyone have any certain perception of you because you don't even know what it's supposed to mean. So if for me, I base everything on what the audience and the competitor landscape is, and every single thing from your verbal identity and visual identity is based on that. So the colors in the logo, let's say, if you were doing the visual identity, the fonts, all of that should have a certain meaning. All of that should be distinct within the industry. So not everyone should be using blue, even if it means professional, if that's what you were looking at. And turning everything from your copy and your verbal identity, your tagline, your name if it's a company, or maybe you have, even if in the speaking industry, if you have a moniker, what you call yourself, you could be a speaker or you could be the expert on this, whatever this may be, and turning everything there, and even your intellectual property, turning all of that into an asset that is based directly on the gaps that you're filling in the market, and knowing your audience so well that you can meet them where they are to create an emotional connection with them.
Okay. Uh, okay. Well, then riddle me this, branding man. With so many platforms and tactics out there, and there's just a new platform every day. How do we speakers avoid wasting time chasing down the wrong things? I mean, I love what you're saying, know your audience. No, it's been a theme of yours if you didn't notice it from the moment we spoke about,
Absolutely.
which I appreciate, by the way. You're speaking like a speaker, by the way. Most of my answers, my questions, should I bring this? Should I do that? Tell me about your audience. I'll answer the question for you. So I like where you're going. Tell me how we avoid wasting time on some of the wrong things that maybe we thought the audience might want. I don't know.
Absolutely. So if you're looking at your marketing,
Mhm.
once you have your brand set overall, so you have know why you're doing everything, you know internally what your vision is, you have your positioning set, so you've done a lot of research on your audience and competitors and have a clear differentiator, you know what your audience's personality is and what your personality is that you can use to write all of your copy and do it in that language that would connect with them, creating the copy, verbal identity, and the visual identity, and then having your website, marketing collateral, and social media profiles. Let's say you have all that set, and now you're ready to go into marketing strategy. In your marketing strategy, there should be a look at what are a lot of speakers, you're all solopreneurs, and you only have so much bandwidth and time, and you can't do everything. I know people want to do everything, you can't. A lot of that would come from if you look at your audience's data and know where they're currently congregating on things. You're never going to create an audience. The audience is always out there. They're just somewhere else right now. You got to find out where they're congregating. And once you know, because you already did your messaging and stuff, you know exactly what you should be saying to them. You just need to figure out where that may be. And I always go to what's the highest leverage actions I can do. And you probably should only do certain new ones every year because it can become overwhelming if you say, I'm going to be on every platform this year. And it's unreasonable because you're going to not learn everything about the platform. And there's not going to be as much trial and error to refine over time. So I would start with one platform where everyone's congregating. I would do research on every single place where they could currently be congregating and figure out why they're there and figuring out how to get the message to switch over to you. And then creating content that will resonate with them. And that would be, I like to do an exercise where it's 100 questions that my audience would ask me. And that gives me 100 different content ideas. And you can reuse those. So you can expand, do short posts about certain things. You can expand, like you could turn some of these questions into a whole speech if you wanted. You could do a 45-minute keynote on some of these topics. But a lot of answering those questions would create certain content that is going to resonate, especially if you know where these people are congregating. And especially if you're able to prioritize and have a lot of trial and error with creating this content.
Okay. Well said, by the way. So let me pin you down on a couple.
Okay.
And I hate doing it because I really don't think there is a one size fits all on this, and you're the expert. But I'm not asking you about where we should be and where people should be in their social media. I'm asking
Okay.
you about professional speakers or presenters or trainers or
Okay.
and I'm finding LinkedIn to be, kind of my home place. But I'm also scratching the surface of Substack. Any thoughts on Substack from you?
I think Substack is a very good platform, and there are ways to monetize on it, which is great. You always look at that as a speaker. And it's very good for repurposing content because the same LinkedIn newsletter you say you could put out could also be a blog for SEO purposes, but that could also be part of your newsletter on Substack, let's say. And then maybe you have extra parts of it that you include and repurpose it into a paid version that people would pay for. So I think it is good and could work in tandem with many things, but that is a way of managing the bandwidth of being a solopreneur and being a speaker in looking how you can be on multiple things, but also repurpose in a way that wouldn't take much more of your time. And I think Substack would be a great opportunity for that. And you can market your Substack through other things like LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's why I'm messing with it a little bit right now because, here we've got a lot of speakers will have YouTube and they'll, videos and, maybe podcasts, things like this, blogs, new LinkedIn newsletters. And what I'm seeing with Substack is one place to kind of push all the content there. And so, to me, it's worth chasing down. I just don't know it's if it's a flavor of the month, because I was hearing a lot more about Substack about a year ago.
Yeah.
I've been, it hasn't been the talk of the town lately, and maybe that's just because people have settled in, but I'm not sure. LinkedIn, you don't have to twist most of our arms on the business side. We're either there or we should be, from what I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about consistency. People who know me know that I refer to myself as being a bit OCD-ish, meaning I refer to it as discipline, but I am rather neurotic about my postings and really every Friday for this and every Tuesday for that. But how important is consistency for in the speaker's world or maybe any world, an entrepreneur, in your mind? Should we do it? Teach our audience, you're going to see my blog every Friday at 7 a.m. come heck or high water, or just put them out when we feel like
That's a very interesting and loaded question, and I think
it.
there's many facets to it.
Okay.
As far as there's many aspects of consistency, and I'm a believer in when I said trying one thing or maybe a few things and then eventually planning out to roll other platforms out other years. I think it's very good to be consistent in putting your messages out more than you would think you would have to. So if you're going to put out a newsletter every month, I think it's good to be ambitious and say, well, how could I do one every week? How could I do one maybe every day? And in the same way that a comedian is going to test out his jokes at the smaller shows, and he's going to go to many more shows than you'd think he'd be at, but he's going to try out at different comedy clubs, try out these different jokes. And for professional speakers, they're going to try out these messages maybe at smaller events. And then eventually you'll see them refine this keynote and have a message that's put together. The marketing works the same way. So if you put out LinkedIn newsletters, let's say more than you would think you'd have to, let's call it 3 times a week, let's a LinkedIn newsletter. Then by the time 6 months rolls around, you'll know exactly what lands with people, what you have to refine, and I think that's really the feedback loop that people need. Whereas if it's posting less consistently or just when they feel like putting a newsletter out, maybe once a month, then I think that's something that it'll take a lot longer to get a feedback loop on it. As far as scheduling consistency, meaning the same time and day for something, I think that's something that is good for some things. Like on a podcast, it's good to know, okay, we're here the same time, same day, and I know when a new episode's coming out. I found on YouTube that that's not as much the case because I don't think YouTube, I just go on YouTube and scroll and I'll show up on someone's feed, and whenever I get a chance, I'm going to listen to this video. I think for things like podcasts, it's great to have consistency though, because I will know, okay, it's Saturday, 8 a.m. This is my listening time on this podcast, and I know I have time every day to listen to it or at least save it for when I want to listen to this. So I think consistency in that way for podcasts especially is great. And for other things like newsletters, I think it is good. Just as an example, other things like YouTube or Instagram or LinkedIn regular posts are not, I wouldn't say it's as important.
Okay. Well, a lot to unpack on that one. You know, for me, I'll give you a little feedback, just one person's experience trying to do this. I've been writing a blog as an example for almost 17 years. And at first, I wrote them every week. And that was good. People really loved them. And then away we went, and I built a nice following. What I found was, from a writing standpoint, some weeks are harder than others. And I really thought the writing was suffering. So this is one person's journey I'm going over right now. It doesn't make it right. But I found a rhythm, and I guess it speaks to your point of maybe we figure out what works for us. Because if
Yeah.
the writing isn't good, don't put it out there. I moved to every 2 weeks, and I can't tell you how many times people to this day tell me I never miss a blog of yours. I read it every single week when they come out. And I smile and think quietly, well, they come out every other week, but I'll bet it feels like every week to you. I really do think they are reading them all. So, I like the consistency. I do think, and I'd like to think for the podcast that people go, oh, it's Tuesday or Thursday. Rob's coming out with a new podcast. Allow me to dream, folks, please. I like that consistency of it, but I'll just, and again, just my journey. The biggest benefit of consistency for me is the discipline that it requires. Because if I wanted to do podcasts when I felt like it, or wrote blogs, or posted materials or newsletters when I felt like it, I think I'd be in trouble. And I think I'm speaking for a lot of people. When you know every other Friday there's a LinkedIn newsletter, so you better get your butt in gear, it gets us going. So, whereas we spoke earlier and I said, Stephen, every answer is depending on the audience, this one depends on the writer a little bit, and the
Yeah.
audience too. But if we're going to put crap out there, but we want to put it out every other day, I think we're going to lose more than we're going to gain.
Yeah, and I think that's something always to look at. It's always something to look at what you can handle, what people like. From my perspective, I
Yeah.
think there's always a balance of putting good content out there and balancing that with, does this have to be the perfect message, or you never know what's going to land? How many ideas can I put out there to see? Because some might be some ideas that you think don't make any sense. You put them out there, people love it. You never know what's going to land with people.
Yeah.
So I think that's something where it's a balancing act sometimes with that.
Yeah. Boy, you said it. There is this battle that goes on with writers, and I'm a part of that fraternity. And of when we know, listen, I can write you 50 articles. One of them is going to be the best, one of them is going to be the worst, and 48 are going to be somewhere in the middle. All 50 of them were with everything I had in the tank that day. It's just numbers. So there is this battle, and the battle is it can't always be perfect. It has to be our best. But I will tell you, Stephen, I am never shocked when I see one LinkedIn newsletter is a great example. When I see one newsletter getting not many comments, not many likes, and another one just getting, you know, hit on really hard, I never go, huh, I thought it would be the other way around. I know this one is really good. I'm actually sometimes mildly disappointed when it doesn't do even better. And when there's one that it's good, but it's not going to shake the trees today,
Yeah,
the audience will speak.
absolutely.
So we learn. All right, last question for you. If someone were listening right now and realized their branding isn't quite where it should be, give me just one step. What do you think the first step for somebody who just learned how to spell branding today? They're a little better than that. I know my audience, but have been a little sloppy on the branding. What it's like going to my daughter's a nutritionist. She'll give me 10 things to work on. Just give me one, and then I'll master it. I'll come for two. What would be maybe just a nice, easy move that people can make, even if it's a thought they need to have?
If they're doing this themselves and just taking one step, I would say people can look at all of your competitors, all of your speakers in the same industry, and look at people's testimonials about them, look what people are saying about them, look at what services they offer, look at their pricing, look at how much they're getting booked, look at their social across all their social media, and take into account what you think aligns with what you do. What are they getting bad results on? What are they not getting bad results on? And is there a subsection you could sit in to maybe niche down to differentiate that way? Or maybe you can differentiate by having different colors, having a different personality, but in a step that they could take, a lot of it can come from their own looking at other speakers' websites and testimonials and style and social media and everything they put out and seeing what they can do differently.
Absolutely perfect. I will tell you, as a guy who mentors authors, one of the first things I tell them is go to the bookstore, go to find a bookstore, go to Barnes and Noble, find one, and go find your book, which is the same words you're using. Which is basically, where would it be? Because a lot of people struggle with that. And I like what you're saying because I don't know which well, go find a speaker. Listen, Tony Robbins, the unicorn. Hey, that was between you and me, by the way. But Tony Robbins might not be quite at your level. Okay. So I'm not so sure I'd be benchmarking Tony Robbins right now. But find someone maybe a little bit above your level that you're trying to, the next step on that ladder. And I like where you're coming from. How are they branding? What does their website look like? What
Yeah,
colors other than blue are they using? I've been listening. And
absolutely.
but I think that's smart, and I think it doesn't drive every answer, but it's a perfect answer to the question, which is, well, what's the first domino? How do we get started? Go find someone that looks a lot like you, but where you're trying to get to a realistic step. And what do their materials look like? If I got that right,
Absolutely.
yeah, outstanding. Listen, how do people get a hold of you?
People can connect with me on LinkedIn, and you could also find me at drapmedia.com. By the time this podcast releases, the URL will be different, but I'll make sure that it redirects to my current website. But mainly connect with me, Stephen Drapkin, on LinkedIn.
Okay. And listen, it's Stevens are spelled different ways. So it's StevenDrapkin. Well, I got that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Drapkin, just the way it sounds, actually. Good. All right, Stephen Drapkin. Definitely connect with him on LinkedIn if you can. That's how I met Stephen, and he's got his eyes on LinkedIn and some other areas too. All right, my man. Listen, I appreciate it. We speakers, we will focus on the message, but we get a little sloppy on the branding now. Now we know what it is. Um, and a few good ideas on how to tackle it. I really appreciate your time and thanks for coming on the show. Really
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I enjoyed our conversation, and I enjoy helping anyone that listened to this.
good. Because folks, if you're looking at your budget, and we're all tight on our budgets. I'm trying to figure out what you're going to put in front of branding. Okay, if people can't find you and don't know what you represent, that's how we started the show. I really think it's going to affect the booking. So this guy shows you one or two bookings you didn't get. He's more than paid for himself. So let's keep an eye on Steven. Pleasure meeting you. Listen, folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. But until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.